The Me Too movement brought real hope for some that people would be held accountable for their words and actions, and that women could expect protection, not further victimization. But once again, we're seeing just how far we have and have not come. And this time it's the Boston Celtics shining light with their deafening silence as Twitter started kicking up word of an impending season-long suspension for head coach Ime Udoka. The second the tweet came out about a, quote, consensual relationship with a female staff member, their words, not mine, an army of armchair internet sleuths took it upon themselves to find and publicly share as much information as they could about female staff members of the team, trying to game out who it was. Sports Talk Radio chimed in too. So what did the Celtics executives say as numerous women in their organization were effectively doxxed and put on display for the world to weigh in on whether they'd be worthy of Udoka? Nothing for a full day. And despite the relationship initially being described as, quote, consensual, later reports indicated the Celtics started investigating after the woman said Udoka made, quote, unwanted comments toward her. I'm joined by Lauren Hindman. She's an assistant professor of sport management at Stonehill College, and Gary Washburn, terrific NBA and Celtics reporter with the Boston Globe. Good to have you both here. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Gary, did we learn anything more about the underlying incident here from today's Celtics Media Day, or no?
Oh, absolutely not. The players were basically told us they know as much as we do. They haven't been privy to a lot of the details, as did probably the main reason exactly why he was suspended. What exactly did he do? And I don't know if Celtics management, owner Rick Grusbeck and president of basketball operations Brad Stevens can share that, are privy to share that information because of privacy laws. But the players were basically kind of, confused. What happened? Yes, we've been told of a consensual relationship between the coach and a staff member of the Celtics, but what more happened? Why did this happen? But like anything else, they've got to move on. The season's not going to be postponed. The games are going to go on. So they've got to move on.
And to follow up on what you said, Jason Tatum, the star player on the team, said he learned about this on Twitter, which is incredible. To me, I have to say, I think I learned more from Matt Barnes, a former NBA player and now with ESPN, than I have from the Celtics. And I'm sure people have seen this video. This is Barnes the day after he defended Udoka, coming back and saying, not so fast. Here he is.
This situation in Boston is deep. It's messy. It's 100 times uglier than any of us thought. I got a call from someone who had all the details, and it's deep. So, man, praying for everybody involved. Hope everyone gets through this.
Gary, is it not fair to say, unless it was really bad, maybe 100 times worse than he had thought, they wouldn't be suspending a coach for a whole season, would they?
Exactly. This coach, Ime Udoka, led them to the NBA Finals. Yeah. Okay, in his first season. He helped change the on-court culture of the team. The players improved. The team obviously improved. They finished 31-10 after having a rough start to the season to get the number 2 seed. They reached the first NBA Finals in 12 years. Like, all good things. So they're heading into this season with super high expectations. The coach coming back for a second year. The players healthy, coming off what was a successful season, and then this. So this had to be worst case scenario for the franchise. Believe me, they did not want to do this. This is not someone with an axe to grind against Coach Udoka. The actions had to meet the penalty.
Lauren, the thing that surprised me most about this, I think, and if I could rank the level of surprise, is the term consensual being used around this relationship, even though nobody outside the organization has any idea what the relationship between the coach and the woman with whom he had the relationship was. I mean, I might argue, I don't know if it was appropriate, if Udoka's here and the woman's here in the hierarchy, that's one thing. I don't think anybody said that, well, they did, unfortunately, that Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton had a consensual relationship. Am I going overboard with this, or where are you on that?
No, absolutely. I think that's a huge part of this is the potential power dynamic, right? There's one thing to have a workplace relationship, and certainly it seems like the Celtics had some policies around that. But when you're talking about an added power dynamic as well, that's when the situation becomes really messy. And again, even though that term consensual was used and was reported initially, further reporting has suggested that there was more to the story, that there were some unwanted comments involved, and certainly we wouldn't expect to see this lengthy of a suspension for a consensual relationship, potentially even with the power dynamics at play.
And Lauren, it seems to me, I mean, you look at the bigger picture, and I'm a layperson in this, but while I'm sure they're not going to defend how the Celtics have handled this publicly, a year-long suspension is pretty intense in the world of professional sports. Is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely starting to see sport organizations hold people to account more often. But I think what's interesting here is usually that's after it's been publicly exposed and they're forced to respond. And here the Celtics were coming to that conclusion on their own investigation that was going on for months before any of us heard wind of this. So I do think that says something about the Celtics' response here, that this was a decision that they made without any kind of public pressure, like we've seen other sport organizations need to have to get to that point.
Gary, I was on the radio during the media day today. So when I turned to one of my coworkers in the newsroom preparing to talk to you two, I said, did anything happen at the media day that I should know about? And one of my coworkers said, well, the interim coach responded to concerns about domestic assault that he had engaged in when he was playing for West Virginia in 2009 when he put his hands around the throat of a woman. And I turned to the woman who said it to me and I said, obviously, that's a bad joke. And she said, no, it's not a bad joke. That's what happened. And he apologized. He's a different man. The Celtics chose to replace Udoka on an interim basis, a guy, admittedly he was younger, he was 21, a guy who has a domestic assault on his record? Really?
Yes. And the question, I do think, however, this is Coach Joe, now the new interim coach Joe Mazzulla has probably had to explain the situation 100 times.
Yeah. And
obviously he convinced the Celtics enough to get a job in the first place under Brad Stevens's, 3 years ago as an assistant coach under Brad Stevens. So now he's got to explain that again. And I think he's a man who seems to has found faith, has found himself. He said today that he has a new identity. He just didn't know who he was. And I guess you could attribute it to just, the mistakes you make while you're in college. And I'm not excusing that or saying that they're right or wrong, but it sounds like he has completely done a 180 since those times and has asked and received, obviously, forgiveness.
Well, again, I that all may be true, and you know the situation much better than I. I'm not sure if I were running the Celtics and they haven't asked me to do it, that's the choice I'd make under the circumstances. I'm sure, Lauren, you saw the other day, Brad Stevens, obviously the former coach, president of the team now, got emotional. I'm told he's not a very emotional kind of guy when he was describing the as I described a minute ago, the treatment of women staff people on the Celtics. If you didn't see it, here is Brad Stevens the other day.
We have a lot of talented women in our organization, and I thought yesterday was really hard on them, and I think that, nobody can control Twitter speculation and rampant bullshit, but I do think that we, as an organization, have a responsibility to make sure we're there to support them now, because a lot of people were dragged unfairly into that.
A lot of people, I would say the majority of people whom I respect, whose account of that I read, Lauren, suggested that if the Celtics were so concerned about those women, they would have acted earlier to insulate them from some of this sadism from, people in their mother's basement. And while I nodded in agreement with that when I read it, what would they have done? They obviously couldn't say, oh, by the way, let me let you know, it's not Jane Doe or Allison Doe or whatever. What should the Celtics have done in an attempt to at least mute that behavior directed at these women?
I agree. I think that any sort of, identifying who it wasn't automatically by default would identify who it is. And they're clearly trying to protect the privacy of the woman involved here. I think perhaps being more upfront with what the allegations were, because I think what was driving a lot of the speculation and a lot of the throwing of these women under the bus was the fact that people were blaming the women because this was a consensual relationship as it was being reported. And so there was this blaming of women. One thing that women face in working in sport that I've found in my research is an assumption that they are working in sport because they want to sleep with the players, or in this case, a coach. And that's not true, but it's something that they have to face in their workplace. And now they were having to face it on Twitter, out in the open, on public. And it was really horrific for all of them.
Gary, you mentioned a minute ago that one of the reasons that the Celtics couldn't provide more details was because of the right to privacy and that sort of thing. Obviously, they should never disclose the name of the woman without her consent. If she wants to go public, that's her right. I don't understand why the Celtics couldn't have described much more about this, not included the woman's name, not including any descriptors that would have allowed someone to figure out who the woman was. It seems to me they're using this privacy thing sort of as a shield to show they're, high-minded, when in essence they're just attempting to use it so that they don't have to disclose any more information.
I also think that they want to avoid lawsuits.
Yeah, that's probably right.
They don't want, because I asked on Friday whether there was going to be any type of penalty or any type of reprimand for the woman involved or anyone else besides Coach Udoka, and I was told no. And I think that's because, one, if it's a subordinate of Coach Udoka, which it is, she can claim that she was pressured. And she can claim, whether it's true or not, and I'm not one to say it's not true, but she can claim in any situation that she was pressured into the situation. So you can't do anything with her. And it's not, although it might be tacky or tasteless to have a relationship with a subordinate or your superior. It's not companies don't want to see people sleeping with someone who is their boss or superior. It's not a fireable offense. So there's nothing that they can do. They want to avoid any lawsuits, because who knows if the Celtics organization is a toxic environment as a whole. That's what they want to avoid. They want this, they're praying that this is a one-off. They're praying this is an exception to the rule, that it's a safe environment for women, that women are not intimidated by male superiors for relationships and whatever else goes on, and they want to make sure that it's safe. So I think that they're doing the path of least resistance. They don't want any trouble from they don't want a lawsuit. They don't want to get sued. They don't want to get included in anything. That's why I think they've been so protective of any information.
Well, by the way, when you say, not to say it's tacky or tasteless, depending on who the individual is, it's possible the only reason she participated in this is because he's the boss. So, which is the whole reason these policies exist. Lauren, I only have 30 seconds. Am I trying to squeeze something good out of this where there is no good when I say the one plus, it seems to me, is that ultimately the penalty was so severe, in my estimation, that maybe that may send a warning shot across the bows of other people in high positions in sport. Is that naive?
I'd like to say it's not naive. I see this again and again, right? We see these one-off situations where we see this response and then it happens again a year later with another team. So I don't know if it'll be enough.
Hope it is. Lauren Hindman, Gary Washburn, really appreciate your time, both of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.